Despair, or can you bring me to ecstasy? The Apache woman asked the virgin cowboy. He admitted, The sun was just beginning to rise over the endless plains, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The cool morning air carried the faint scent of wild grass and the distant sound of a flowing river. In this quiet, wide-open world, a young cowboy named Daniel was riding along a narrow trail, his horse's hooves making gentle thuds against the soft earth. He had grown up in a small town on the edge of the prairie, and from an early age he had learned the ways of the land, how to care for horses, and how to read the signs of nature. Yet, despite all he knew, there was a curiosity in him, a desire to see more of the world beyond the hills he had always known. Daniel's journey had not been planned. He had left home with only the essentials packed, a small bag with his few belongings, a sturdy rope, and a sense of adventure that he could hardly explain. Every step he took felt like both freedom and uncertainty. The landscape stretched endlessly with rolling hills, clusters of trees, and wide rivers that shimmered in the sunlight. As he rode, he noticed the subtle details that many would overlook, the way the wind whispered through the leaves, the tracks of animals along the riverbank, and the way the light shifted over the plains as the sun climbed higher. Each sight reminded him that there was a life beyond the routine he had known, a world filled with stories waiting to be discovered. Farther along the trail, he noticed a small encampment nestled near a grove of trees. Smoke rose gently from a fire, and the sound of voices carried softly in the air. Curious but cautious, Daniel guided his horse closer, keeping a careful eye on his surroundings. As he approached, he realized the people in the camp were different from those he had known. But gradually, he began to notice things he had never seen before. The gentle sway of the reeds in the wind, the flash of a fish jumping in the water, and even the faint tracks of animals moving silently along the banks. Each detail seemed to tell a story, and Daniel realized that the lessons of the land were not only about knowledge but about patience, awareness, and connection. After a long period of quiet observation, Kaya spoke again. "Now you see what I mean," she said. "The world is full of lessons, but we must learn to slow down and pay attention." Only then do the details reveal their secrets.
Daniel nodded, feeling a deep sense of understanding beginning to take root.
It was not just about surviving or exploring. It was about learning to notice, to respect, and to reflect. He felt a growing admiration for Kaya, not just for her skills, but for her ability to see the world so clearly and to teach without forcing her wisdom. As the afternoon approached, they began to descend into the canyon floor, where the river flowed swiftly over smooth stones. Kaya guided Daniel to a shallow area where the water ran calm and clear. She encouraged him to wash his hands and face, explaining that water was life-giving and cleansing, not just physically but spiritually. Daniel followed her guidance, feeling the cold water against his skin and the sense of renewal it brought. Kaya explained that these small rituals, simple as they seemed, were important reminders of the connection between humans and nature. Every action, no matter how small, could honor that connection. While resting by the river, Kaya shared more stories of her people's history. She spoke of ancestors who had faced challenges with courage, who had moved across lands far and wide, and who had preserved their culture through storytelling and careful observation of the world. Daniel listened with fascination, realizing that every story carried lessons for life, about resilience, patience, courage, and respect.
He began to understand that these stories were more than history. They were a guide to living thoughtfully and meaningfully in every moment.
As the day went on, they explored the riverbanks, discovering hidden caves and observing the wildlife. Daniel was amazed at how Kaya seemed to know everything about the land, where animals were likely to appear, how the plants grew, and even where the safest paths were. She encouraged him to practice his own observations, to notice patterns, and to ask questions. Daniel found himself becoming more confident, more aware, and more connected to the land than ever before. The canyon, once just a scenic place, had transformed into a classroom of experience, patience, and insight. Evening began to fall, painting the canyon walls in deep oranges, reds, and purples.
Kaya suggested they find a sheltered area to set up a temporary camp. Daniel helped gather dry branches and stones to build a small fire, while Kaya instructed him on the best ways to prepare for the night outdoors safely.
As they worked together, he noticed the care and thoughtfulness she put into every step, and he realized that survival was about respect, awareness, and preparation as much as it was about courage or strength. That night, under a sky filled with stars, Daniel sat quietly by the fire, while Kaya prepared a simple meal. The light from the fire flickered against the canyon walls, creating shadows that danced across the rocks. They shared thoughts about the day, reflecting on the lessons learned and the observations made. Daniel felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the knowledge he was gaining, for the land that was teaching him, and for Kaya's patient guidance. He began to realize that true learning required humility, attention, and openness to experiences beyond what he had known before. As he lay down to rest that night, Daniel thought about the changes he had already felt within himself. The journey was no longer just about traveling across the land. It was about understanding, growth, and connection. The canyon, the river, and the surrounding wilderness had become more than a place to explore. They had become a teacher, a guide, and a mirror reflecting his own curiosity and willingness to learn. He realized that every step, every observation, and every interaction with Kaya and her people was shaping him into someone more thoughtful, patient, and aware of the world around him. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of the canyon, the river, and the lessons of the day. Daniel's mind replayed the sights, sounds, and stories, and he awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new lessons, each offering an opportunity to grow and understand more deeply. Kaya had opened a door to a world full of wisdom, patience, and connection, and he felt honored to walk through it alongside her. The night passed quietly, and when dawn arrived once more, Daniel was ready. He rose with determination, eager to continue his journey of discovery. The land had taught him much, yet he knew there were countless lessons still waiting. Each day offered new experiences, and with Kaya's guidance, he felt prepared to face them, observe carefully, and learn from every moment. The journey was becoming more than an adventure. It was a path of growth, understanding, and transformation. One step at a time, guided by the wisdom of the land and the quiet strength of those who knew it best. The morning air was crisp and fresh as Daniel awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the trees. The canyon, quiet and still, seemed almost alive in its gentle movements. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a hawk, and the soft trickle of the river below. Today, Kaya had promised would be a day of challenge and discovery, one that would test both his understanding of the land and his ability to trust in himself. Daniel felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He had already learned so much, but he sensed that this day would push him even further. After a simple breakfast by the fire, Kaya approached him with a calm but determined look. "Today," she said, "you will learn to move through the land as more than an observer. You will begin to understand how to anticipate, to respond, and to be a part of the natural flow. The land has rhythms, and if you can read them, you will know much about life, about people, and about yourself." Daniel listened intently, knowing that her words held lessons deeper than he could yet understand. He trusted her guidance completely, and felt ready to face whatever the day would bring. They began by heading into a dense part of the forest that Daniel had not yet explored. The trees here were taller, their branches thick with leaves, casting shadows that danced across the uneven ground. Kaya moved silently, her steps careful and precise, and Daniel struggled to keep up, mindful of each root and stone that could trip him. But she encouraged him to slow down, to feel the ground beneath his feet, and to pay attention to the sounds and smells of the forest. At first, Daniel found it difficult to adjust his usual pace, but as minutes passed, he began to notice details he had never seen before. The faint scratch of an animal on bark, the way sunlight created patterns through the leaves, and the soft scent of wildflowers mixed with earth. Dusk. Kaya stopped suddenly, crouching beside a patch of disturbed soil. She gestured for Daniel to come closer. "Look," she said, pointing to the tracks left behind. "A family of foxes passed through here last night." Notice the spacing of their steps, the depth of the prints. They tell you how many, how fast, and even the mood of the animals. Everything has a story if you're willing to read it.
Daniel leaned in, tracing the impressions with his fingers.
At first it seemed like nothing more than marks in the dirt, but as Kaya explained the patterns he began to see the story. The mother guiding her young, the careful way they moved to avoid danger, the rhythm of life continuing quietly, carefully, without chaos. He felt a deep respect for the creatures of the forest and for Kaya, whose understanding of these subtleties was remarkable. As they continued, Kaya introduced another challenge. "We will climb the ridge above the canyon," she said. "From there, you will need to navigate using only the land and your senses. No maps, no guides, just observation, patience, and understanding." Daniel felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. He had learned much, but the thought of relying entirely on his own judgment made him both nervous and eager. They began the climb, the path narrow and steep. Kaya's instructions were precise. Watch the position of the sun. Notice the texture of the soil. Feel the wind's direction and listen to the subtle sounds of the forest. Daniel followed carefully, realizing that this exercise was as much about self-awareness as it was about navigating the land. Halfway up the ridge, they paused to rest. Daniel was out of breath, his arms and legs tired from the climb, but Kaya encouraged him to take a moment to observe.
"This is as important as the climb," she said.
Notice how the shadows move, how the wind shifts, and how the land itself gives clues. The journey is not just physical, it is mental and emotional. Learn to trust yourself, and the land will guide you. Breaths, taking deep breaths and focusing on the sensations around him. Slowly he felt his mind calm, his awareness sharpen, and a new sense of confidence begin to grow within him. By late morning they reached the top of the ridge. The view took Daniel's breath away. Pastory. From this height the canyon spread out like a living tapestry, the river twisting like silver through the trees, the plains stretching endlessly in the distance, and the mountains rising on the far horizon. Kaya gestured for him to sit and take it all in. "Now," she said, "you can see the patterns. Life, like this land, is connected. Every action affects another. Observe, think, and learn." Daniel absorbed the scene, feeling a new understanding take hold. He realized that navigating the world required more than strength or skill. It required attention, reflection, and the ability to see connections where others might not. As they descended the ridge, Kaya taught Daniel to find and collect materials for shelter. They built a small lean-to using branches and leaves, and she showed him how to make it stable and protective against the elements. Daniel worked carefully, realizing that each choice mattered. The angle of a branch, the placement of leaves, the balance of the structure. Through this, he learned that preparation and foresight were just as important in life as courage and action. Kaya's teachings were patient but firm, guiding him to understand that small details often held the key to success.
In the afternoon, they explored a hidden grove that Kaya described as sacred.
The grove was quiet and shaded, with sunlight filtering softly through the canopy.
Here, she taught Daniel the art of mindfulness, observing without judgment, listening without distraction, and appreciating without interference.
They sat together in silence, letting the sounds of the grove fill their awareness. The gentle rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, and the distant murmur of the river. But Daniel felt a deep sense of calm and clarity, as if the grove had opened a space inside him where understanding and patience could grow. Later, Kaya shared stories of resilience. She spoke of times when her people had faced hardship, when rivers had flooded, and when food had been scarce. She explained how knowledge of the land, careful observation, and respect for natural cycles had allowed them to survive and thrive. Daniel listened intently, recognizing parallels in his own life. Challenges he had faced, moments of uncertainty, and times when patience and learning had made all the difference. He began to understand that the lessons Kaya shared were not just for the wilderness but for every part of life, including the choices, relationships, and challenges he would encounter beyond the canyon. As evening approached, they returned to the camp, carrying with them a sense of accomplishment. Daniel felt stronger, more aware, and more connected, not just to the land, but to Kaya and her people. The day had tested him, taught him patience, and revealed insights about himself he had not expected. Around the fire, he shared his experiences with the others, who listened with interest and encouragement. Daniel felt a growing sense of belonging, not because he had fully mastered the skills, but because he had shown effort, respect, and willingness to learn. That night, lying beneath a canopy of stars, Daniel reflected on the day. He thought about the ridge, the hidden grove, and the lessons Kaya had taught. He realized that growth often came through challenge, that understanding required effort, and that trust in oneself and others and in the world was essential. The canyon, the river, the trees, and the animals had become more than surroundings. They were teachers, mirrors, and companions on his journey.
He felt a deep gratitude for the opportunity to learn, for Kaya's patient guidance.
Pacingly, filled with images of the ridge, the river, and the quiet strength of the grove, Daniel knew that the journey was far from over. There were more lessons to learn, more challenges to face, and more understanding to gain. But for the first time, he felt truly ready, not just to navigate the wilderness, but to grow as a person, to appreciate the connections between all living things, and to carry the lessons of patience, observation, and respect into every part of his life. By dawn, Daniel awoke with renewed determination. The day ahead promised new adventures, new experiences, and new insights. Kaya's teachings had opened doors to a world he had never known, a world of wisdom, awareness, and connection. With every step, every observation, and every moment of reflection, Daniel was becoming more than a traveler across the land. He was becoming a student of life itself, learning the quiet strength that came from understanding, respect, and patience. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the canyon walls, he felt ready to continue the journey, eager to discover what the next day would bring. The first light of dawn painted the canyon in soft shades of gold and pink, reflecting on the river below and casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Daniel awoke with a sense of calm purpose. The previous days had taught him patience, observation, and respect for the land, and he now understood that the lessons he had learned were not just about survival. They were about life itself. Today, Kaya had promised, would be a day of reflection, a day to understand how far he had come and what it truly meant to be connected to the world around him. After a quiet breakfast, Kaya approached him with a serene smile. "Today," she said, "you will take what you have learned and use it to see the bigger picture. The land has taught you to observe, to think, and to act carefully. Now you will learn to understand yourself and your place within it."
Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness.
He had gained skills, confidence, and awareness, but this day was about internalizing everything, about understanding not just the land but his own heart and mind. They set off toward a hilltop that overlooked both the river and the wide plains beyond. The path was familiar yet challenging, with loose stones and hidden roots that required his full attention. Kaya walked beside him, guiding him with gentle instructions. "Watch the wind, notice the light, and feel the rhythm of the earth beneath your feet. Daniel moved with greater awareness now, no longer struggling to keep up but walking with steady confidence. He noticed the subtle movements of the trees, the soft call of a distant bird, and the way the sunlight played across the terrain. Each step reminded him that he had grown, that he was learning to live in harmony with the world rather than simply moving through it. When they reached the hilltop, Kaya instructed him to sit quietly and observe. From this vantage point, Daniel could see everything: the river winding like silver, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the plains stretching endlessly to the horizon. Grasp. He could see patterns in the land, the flow of life, and even the signs of animal activity in the distance. Kaya sat beside him, letting him take in the scene without interruption. "Barish, what do you see?" she asked, after a while. Daniel looked around, his mind alive with observations. "Piss. I see how everything is connected," he said slowly. "The river feeds the trees. The trees provide shelter. The animals move between them. And even the wind seems to carry messages." Breath. "Nothing exists alone." Kaya nodded approvingly. "Exactly," she said. "And now you understand the lesson." Breath. "Life is much like this landscape. Every choice, every action, every thought affects something else." Inspiration. Awareness and understanding create balance. Daniel felt a deep sense of clarity as he reflected on the past days. The lessons of patience, observation, and respect now forming a complete picture in his mind. After a period of quiet reflection, Kaya suggested they practice another skill: tracking and following the natural flow of the land to reach a destination without taking the obvious path. Breaths. Daniel had done similar exercises before, but now he approached it with a new level of confidence and awareness. He read the subtle signs: slight depressions in the soil, the direction of broken twigs, and the way leaves were bent by the wind. With each observation, he gained insight, realizing that true skill was not only in action but in thoughtful interpretation. Kaya watched him closely, offering small suggestions but allowing him the space to discover on his own. By midday, they reached a small plateau where wildflowers grew in abundance. Kaya encouraged Daniel to kneel and examine them closely. "But notice the colors, the patterns, the way they grow. Every detail matters." Life is full of lessons if we take the time to see them. Daniel leaned in, studying the flowers, the bees moving between them, and the small insects hiding among the leaves. He marveled at how such simple things held so much complexity and beauty. Kaya's teachings had opened his eyes to the world in ways he had never imagined. He no longer just saw, he observed. He no longer just walked, he understood. In the afternoon, they returned to the river where Daniel had first learned to read the tracks of animals. Kaya asked him to practice again, to recall the lessons of patience, observation, and interpretation. This time, Daniel moved with ease, noticing even the faintest markings in the soil. He identified tracks left by deer, birds, and small mammals, recognizing their paths and habits. Kaya smiled, impressed by his progress. "You have grown," she said.
You are no longer just learning. You are beginning to understand. Awareness, respect, and patience have become part of you."
Bang. Daniel felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself alone, but in the connection he now shared with the land and with Kaya's guidance. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in rich oranges and purples, they returned to the camp. Daniel reflected on the journey. The ridge climbs, the hidden grove, the river, and the lessons of observation and patience. Each day had built upon the last, creating a tapestry of understanding that was both practical and profound. He realized that the journey had not only been about exploring the land, but about exploring himself, about learning to trust his senses, his judgment, and his heart. That evening, around the fire, Kaya shared stories of her people's celebrations and traditions. Daniel listened with fascination, understanding that these rituals were not just customs, but expressions of connection to the land, to the community, and to the passage of life. The stories emphasize the importance of learning from experience, respecting the past, and preparing for the future. Daniel felt a growing sense of belonging not because he had fully mastered the skills, but because he had shown respect, dedication, and willingness to learn. After the meal, Daniel and Kaya walked to the edge of the river, where the reflection of the stars shimmered on the water. Their clothing was vibrant and adorned with patterns that told stories of their heritage, and their movements were graceful, as if each action had a meaning. Among them was a young woman named Kaya, whose presence seemed to capture the attention of everyone around her. She moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes sharp yet gentle, taking in everything around her with awareness and care. Kaya had grown up with the traditions of her people, learning from elders how to live in harmony with the land, how to gather food without harming nature, and how to respect the spirits of the rivers, trees, and animals. Her life was intertwined with the rhythms of the world around her, a connection that gave her both strength and peace. When she noticed Daniel approaching, her curiosity was immediate. He was different from anyone she had seen. A stranger in unfamiliar clothing, carrying an air of both caution and wonder. She wondered what had brought him to their land and whether he understood the ways of the world they lived in. Daniel dismounted carefully, tying his horse to a nearby tree, and walked toward the camp. He greeted Kaya with a polite nod, and though words were few at first, there was an unspoken understanding forming between them. They were both observers in a new story, trying to understand each other without rushing. Daniel shared bits of his life, how he had grown up on the prairie, the routines he knew, and the dreams that had led him to wander. Kaya listened with interest, sometimes smiling at his surprises, sometimes asking questions that made him think about the world in ways he never had. Each conversation, each exchange of glances, built a bridge of trust between them, a sense of recognition that they were both part of something larger than themselves. As the day unfolded, Daniel explored the surrounding area under Kaya's guidance. She showed him how to read the tracks of animals, how to find water hidden beneath the soil, and how to move quietly through the land without disturbing its balance. Each lesson was a discovery, and Daniel felt a growing respect for the way she lived in harmony with the world. They laughed together when mistakes were made, shared moments of silence when the beauty of nature was overwhelming, and slowly a friendship began to take root. Evening approached, and the sky transformed into deep purples and reds. The campfire was lit, and the smell of cooking food filled the air. Daniel sat nearby, watching Kaya and the others prepare the meal, noticing the care and attention they put into each step. He felt a sense of belonging he had not experienced before. Not because he had always known these people, but because in that moment he was accepted as he was, his presence acknowledged without judgment, but desperate. As night fell, stars appeared one by one, bright and distant, and the camp grew quiet. Daniel sat by the fire, reflecting on the day's events, realizing that this meeting with Kaya and her people was more than chance. It was the beginning of a journey that would change his understanding of life, friendship, and the world itself. In that first part of his story, Daniel was still learning, still observing, still taking in the vastness of a world that was much larger and richer than he had imagined. Kaya's presence, strong yet gentle, inspired him to look beyond his own experiences and consider the lives of others with empathy and curiosity. The plains, the rivers, the trees, and the people became part of his own unfolding story, a story of discovery, respect, and connection. But as he drifted to sleep under the open sky, the distant sound of the river soothing his thoughts, he knew that this was only the beginning. A first step into a life filled with unexpected lessons, meaningful friendships, and the quiet beauty of a world waiting to be explored. The morning sun slowly rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the wide plains. Daniel woke with a quiet sense of anticipation, feeling the cool breeze on his face and the soft sounds of nature around him. Birds called from the trees, and the distant river sparkled in the early light. The day promised new lessons and discoveries, and Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today he would learn more about Kaya's people, their ways, and perhaps even about himself. Kaya approached him with a calm smile.
Good morning,
She said, her voice soft but confident.
I thought we could explore the northern part of the land today.
There are places you've never seen, and lessons only the land can teach. Daniel nodded, feeling grateful for her guidance. He had never met anyone who seemed so connected to the earth, so aware of every sound, smell, and movement. As they walked together, Kaya explained how every plant, every rock, and every animal had a role in the balance of life. Daniel listened closely, realizing how little he had truly understood about the land he had grown up on. As they moved deeper into the forested area, Kaya showed him how to identify different herbs and plants, not just for food, but also for healing. She pointed out the ones that could soothe a wound, calm the mind, or give strength to the body. Daniel carefully observed her hands, the way she moved with precision and respect, touching each plant with care. He tried to remember the names and uses, though it was more than just memorizing. It was learning to feel the connection between nature and the people who depended on it. While exploring, they came across a small clearing where the sun shone brightly through the branches. Kaya stopped and gestured for Daniel to sit beside her. "This place is special," she explained. "It is a meeting point for the animals in the wind. It reminds us to listen and to be aware of the world around us. Sometimes, the land teaches more than words ever could." Daniel sat quietly, closing his eyes and taking in the sounds of the forest. At first, he only noticed the obvious, the rustling leaves, and the distant calls of birds, but gradually he began to hear subtler things. The faint movement of a rabbit in the underbrush, the soft hum of insects, and even the rhythm of the wind as it passed through the trees. It was as if the land itself was speaking to him, offering guidance and wisdom. After some time they continued walking, and reached a riverbank where the water ran clear and fast over smooth stones. Daniel knelt to drink, feeling the cool water refresh him. Kaya sat beside him and began to tell stories of her people, their history, their struggles, and their triumphs. She spoke of how they had learned to live in harmony with the land, to respect the animals, and to protect the rivers and forests. Daniel listened intently, fascinated by the depth of knowledge and understanding in her words. He realized that her people's way of life was not just about survival. It was about respect, balance, and awareness, a way of living that he had never fully appreciated in his own upbringing. As they followed the river upstream, Daniel noticed tracks along the muddy bank. Kaya knelt and traced the marks with her fingers. "See these?" she said. "They tell a story. A deer passed here yesterday, and a fox came through last night. Every creature leaves a message if you know how to read it." Daniel leaned closer, trying to interpret the subtle signs. At first it seemed like nothing more than random marks in the mud, but with Kaya's guidance he began to see patterns, movement, and intention. He marveled at how much could be understood from careful observation, how every detail mattered. By midday they arrived at a small hill that overlooked the surrounding plains. The view was breathtaking, rivers snaking through the landscape, patches of forest, and distant mountains rising against the sky. Kaya asked Daniel to sit and take in the scene. "This view teaches patience and perspective," she said. "From here you can see how everything connects. No part of the land exists alone, and no action happens without affecting another. Life is much like this. Every choice matters. Every action has consequences." Daniel felt a sense of awe. He had never thought of the world in such a connected way, where even small decisions had ripple effects beyond what one could see.
As they descended the hill, Kaya shared more about her people's customs and rituals.
She explained how they celebrated the changing seasons, how they marked important moments in life, and how storytelling preserved the wisdom of generations. Daniel was struck by the richness of their culture, the care, intention, and respect that went into every tradition. He began to understand that her guidance was not only about survival in the wilderness, but about learning to live thoughtfully, meaningfully, and harmoniously. Late in the afternoon, they reached a grove filled with ancient trees. The air was cooler here, and the shade offered a welcome relief from the sun.
Kaya instructed Daniel to gather a few fallen branches and stones, and then she showed him how to build a small structure that could protect him from the elements if he were to spend a night outdoors.
He followed her instructions carefully, noticing how every detail mattered. Rask as he worked, Kaya explained how these skills were not only practical but also symbolic. They represented preparation, awareness, and respect for the environment. While they rested in the grove, Daniel felt a growing sense of connection to the land, to Kaya, and to the lessons he was learning. He realized that his journey was changing him in ways he had not anticipated. The prairie he had left behind felt smaller, more limited, compared to the vast knowledge and perspective he was gaining. Kaya's patience, wisdom, and understanding had opened his eyes to a world where observation, respect, and care were as important as courage and strength. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Kaya suggested they return to the camp. On the way back, Daniel reflected on everything he had seen and learned that day. He understood that this was only the beginning. There were countless lessons still waiting, experiences that would challenge him, and knowledge that would shape the person he was becoming. Kaya walked beside him, her presence steady and reassuring, a silent reminder that trust and guidance could turn uncertainty into understanding.
When they reached the camp, the fire was already lit, and the smell of cooking food mingled with the scent of the evening air.
But Daniel felt welcomed, not just by Kaya, but by the entire community. He had been an outsider in the morning, but by evening, he felt a part of something larger. They shared stories and laughter, and Daniel realized that connection was more than friendship. It was a recognition of shared humanity, of being seen and understood. That night, as Daniel lay under the stars, he thought about the day's lessons. He had learned to observe, to respect, and to understand the delicate balance of life around him. He had discovered that learning was not just about information, but about experience, reflection, and openness to new perspectives. Kaya's guidance had opened a door to a world of knowledge and empathy he had never imagined, and he felt both humbled and inspired. The journey was far from over, but he knew that with each step he was growing, not just as a traveler or a cowboy, but as a person capable of understanding, respect, and care. The plains stretched endlessly around him, silent except for the whispers of the wind and the occasional call of a distant animal. Daniel's thoughts wandered, considering the lessons of the land, the wisdom of Kaya, and the importance of patience and attention. He realized that this was more than a journey across the plains. It was a journey into himself, into a deeper understanding of life, nature, and human connection. And as sleep slowly overtook him, he carried with him a sense of gratitude and anticipation, knowing that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new discoveries, and new moments that would continue to shape the story of his life. The first light of dawn crept across the plains, turning the horizon into soft shades of gold and pink. Daniel stirred, stretching his limbs and listening to the quiet sounds of the camp waking up. Birds chirped, horses shifted in their ties, and the faint crackle of the fire told him that Kaya and the others had already begun their morning tasks. Today felt different. A sense of anticipation hung in the air. Daniel was eager to continue learning, to explore more of the land, and to understand the ways of the people who had welcomed him so warmly. Kaya approached him with her usual calm smile, carrying a small bundle of herbs. "Today," she said, "we will learn about the night and the day, and how both are connected. The land changes, and every change has a lesson if we are willing to see it." Daniel nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and respect. He had come to trust Kaya's guidance, and had begun to understand that her lessons were not just about surviving in the wilderness. They were about understanding life itself. They set out together toward a nearby canyon that Kaya had described as a place of learning and reflection. The path was rocky and uneven, forcing Daniel to pay close attention to each step. He quickly realized that the land could teach patience as much as skill. Kaya moved ahead with ease, her familiarity with the terrain evident, but she often turned to guide him, pointing out hidden footholds, loose stones, and areas where a misstep could lead to trouble. Daniel appreciated her careful teaching. It reminded him that every lesson required both awareness and practice.
As they walked, Kaya began to explain the deeper connection her people had with the land.
"The canyon has its own spirit," she said. "The rocks, the wind, and the water that flows through it all have stories. To truly live here, one must learn to listen, not just with ears, but with the heart." Breaths. Daniel glanced at her, trying to understand what she meant. At first it seemed mystical or symbolic, but as he observed the canyon more closely, he began to notice subtle movements, the way the sunlight danced on the rocks, the gentle ripple of water over smooth stones, and the patterns of birds flying through the narrow sky above. It was as if the land was alive in ways he had never considered.
By mid-morning, they reached a small plateau overlooking the canyon floor.
Round, Daniel could see the river winding far below, surrounded by dense shrubs and clusters of trees. Kaya encouraged him to sit quietly and observe, to notice not only the obvious, but also the subtle details. At first he struggled to remain still. His mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, or what he might discover. They stood in silence for a moment, feeling the quiet power of the land around them. Kaya spoke softly.
You have learned much, Daniel.
Not just about the land, but about patience, observation, and connection. Remember, these lessons are not bound to this place. They will guide you wherever you go. Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He understood that the knowledge he had gained here was more than survival. It was wisdom that could guide him in life, in relationships, and in understanding the world around him.
As night deepened, Daniel lay beneath the stars, reflecting on the journey. He thought about the ridge, the canyon, the river, the hidden grove, and every moment of learning, struggle, and triumph.
He realized that he had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware. The land had become more than a place to explore. It had become a teacher, a companion, and a mirror reflecting his own growth. Kaya's guidance had been patient and thoughtful, encouraging him to observe, reflect, and connect in ways he had never experienced before. Sleep came gently, carrying dreams of the canyon, the river, and the lessons of the day. Daniel felt a sense of peace he had never known, the understanding that growth came through careful observation, patience, and respect, and that every connection, whether to the land, to another person, or to oneself, was valuable and meaningful. Breath. He knew that the journey was not ending. There were still lessons to learn and paths to explore. But he also knew that he was no longer the same person who had arrived uncertain and inexperienced. Desk. He had grown into someone more aware, thoughtful, and connected. When dawn arrived once more, Daniel rose with quiet determination. He packed his belongings and prepared to continue his journey, knowing that the skills, lessons, and insights he had gained would guide him wherever he went. Kaya stood beside him, smiling, proud of his growth. "You are ready," she said. "Not because the journey ends here, but because you now understand how to continue it thoughtfully." Daniel felt a sense of gratitude and confidence. The land, Kaya, and the lessons of patience, observation, and connection had transformed him, and he knew he would carry these gifts with him for the rest of his life. As he rode away from the camp, the river sparkling in the early light, and the plain stretching endlessly ahead, Daniel felt a deep sense of freedom and purpose. He had learned that true understanding came from careful attention, respect for life, and an openness to learning from every experience. The journey had been more than an adventure. It had been a transformation, a path towards self-awareness, and a connection with the world that he would never forget. And as the wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of grass, water, and earth, Daniel smiled, knowing that he was ready for whatever the future held, guided by the lessons of the land, the wisdom of Kaya, and the strength of his own growing understanding.